Good afternoon, everybody. Having spent much of my career in transportation infrastructure development and urban services around the world, I'm particularly excited to introduce this final session at the MAS Summit for New York City on one of our most critical topics, the future of urban mobility. We save the best for last. As we've heard again and again these past 2 days, by 2050, the world's cities will hold over 70% of the population and generate 86% of the global GDP. In order to accommodate this growth sustainably and ensure our cities continue to be livable, productive, and resilient, partnerships and coalitions are coming together in cities around the world, bringing together industry, activists, and government to develop smarter, more sustainable, more equitable, and more environmentally friendly forms of transportation. Studies indicate that today, 64% of all travel kilometers made are urban, and the amount of travel within urban areas is expected to triple by 2050. Is the continued presence of the automobile in cities a threat to urban livability? Are there imaginative alternatives to integrating cars into walkable neighborhoods that include complete streets? What does the next generation of urban transportation look like? As you know, MAS is working on how cities can foster both their livability and resilience. And the transportation initiatives seen here in New York City are a great example of what a city can do to boost both. These innovations are a triumph of the partnerships I mentioned. And with us to discuss these crucial challenges are here with us today Matt Flegenheimer, Metro Breaking News reporter with the New York Times, who will be our moderator. Mark Gorton, alternative transportation activist, founder and chairman of Open Plans. Sue Zielinski, managing director of the Sustainable Mobility and Accessibility Research and Transformation Program at the University of Michigan. Bruce Schaller, Deputy Commissioner for Traffic and Planning, New York City Department of Transportation. Public leadership is critical to this topic. And in New York City, we continue to benefit from the extraordinary commitment and skills of Janette Sadik-Khan, who shared last year's Rockefeller Foundation Jane Jacobs Medal with activist Paul Steely-White. Would you welcome, please, to the MAS podium, the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation, Janette Sadik-Khan.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you so much. Well, thanks, Carlos. It's great to be here once again for the next MAS Summit, and I think I certainly share everybody's enthusiasm and excitement about the future of New York City, and I really want to thank Jeannie and Vin for putting together what has been a rock star slate of speakers and topics. It's really exciting. And I think that in looking at the future of urban mobility, it's fair to say that New York City has been a bit of a laboratory over the last 5 years, one in which we've tried and proven new approaches and new possibilities on the streets of New York. And there is also no shortage of new programs and projects to come in the next 400 plus days. The fact is that cities that are thriving in the 21st century, there we go, have already put into place a huge array of innovative different projects and programs that improve the balance and the efficiency and the effectiveness and the choice and the sustainability of their cities. And we're seeing it all over. We're seeing it in places like London with the congestion pricing. We are seeing it in places like Paris. We are seeing it in Copenhagen. We are seeing it in Bogota, just to name a few. And there are several contexts for this, and one certainly is competitiveness, but the other for New York is growth. And we're projected to grow from 8.4 million people to 9.4 million people by 2030. And the challenge, as Mayor Bloomberg outlined in his Plan YC initiative in 2007, is to make a 9.4 million city work better than it does with 1 million less people today. And that means that you can't just take the transportation program of 2007 and project it forward to handle all this new growth and all this increase in population. we need to be smart and efficient about the way we approach our systems. And it is a national issue, too. The Census Bureau projects that by 2030, we are going to have a 1/3 increase in population in the United States, 100 million more people by 2050. And most of them are going to be concentrated on just 12% of the land area in the US. And accommodating this significant growth with single occupant vehicles simply isn't going to work. And I think that's why you are seeing a real flowering of innovation in cities across the country. And you're seeing versions of many of the projects and programs that we're implementing here in New York. Within this context, I think it's notable that public behavior is already reflecting these major changes in these trends. And in New York, you can see from the chart that driving leveled off a little while ago, and that transit absorbed almost all of the growth in travel demand since 1995. And nationally, driving started leveling off in 2004 and peaked in 2007. So we don't really know what this is going to look like when the economy picks back up and really recovers, but this is the biggest trend change that we've seen since World War II. At the same time, there are other ways of getting around that are really booming. There is a huge resurgence in inner-city bus travel. Many of our interstate highways, like I-95, are actually functioning like mass transit facilities these days. They're just the tons and tons of bus traffic that you see on I-95 is just one example of what's going on there. And all of these trends are linked to the development of a knowledge economy, and the increasing number of Americans that are in and near cities, the fact that we've got much higher gas prices, and that young people are not drawn to cars as automatically as they have been in the past. There was a poll that was taken last year that found that 46% of Americans aged 18 to 24 said that they'd choose access to the internet over access to their car. So, how do these trends manifest in New York? As with inner-city bus, when we're seeing more attractive services, people are actually voting with their Metro cards. And all of the select bus service routes that we've announced have a package of different programs, including camera-enforced dedicated bus lanes, traffic signal priority, giving buses the green light, and holding it for them when they're going through, a system where passengers pay before they get on the bus, which is a big part of the delay in bus travel. There's nothing more frustrating than standing behind somebody that has waited for the bus for 10 minutes and then they suddenly decide that they need to pull out their Metro card or the fare then. What were you doing for those 10 minutes? I have no idea what you were doing. So we are now actually asking that they pay first and then get on the bus. And so travel times are down, ridership is way up. It's a big success story. We've seen the same thing with our greatly expanded bike network. We've added 300 miles of on-street bike lanes since 2006. There's been a steep increase in ridership, and the way that they are built truly interacts. Oh, I'm way ahead here, going the wrong way. A truly interconnected network is really delivering big dividends, and you're seeing big steep increases in cycling. And despite a lot of the noise that's created by a few groups and the press, support continues to grow for this transportation option. It's become stronger over time. You can see the trends reflected even in the previous slides, which showed 66% support, 69% support for bike lanes, and now 74% support for the bike share program on the heels of the so-called bike backlash of 2010 to 2011. If this was an election, 74% support for the bike share program, this would be a landslide. We're also seeing big support from our the crowdsourcing that we did for the bike share stations. We had over 10,000 people submit suggested locations for just 600 stations. And I think this technology, and I have to acknowledge Mark Gorton in his open plan group. They've done a lot to sort of take us to the 21st century using technology and better web applications to provide information to help communities make better decisions. One of the big strengths that New York City has is that it provides a set of options for getting around. And a lot of what we're doing is expanding the menu of options that New Yorkers have and meet the current concerns about health, environmental protection, the quality of life in neighborhoods. And I think that the embrace of bike share and the fact that Zipcar continues to build its market in New York are signs that the culture of vehicle ownership is giving way to one of on-demand services, and where people will use information applications to select the type of travel that meets their needs. Even the city government is participating. 2 years ago, New York City DOT started a Zipcar program with 300 DOT employees. We're Zipcarring the New York City DOT municipal fleet. That will be expanded, and I think that's really just the shape of things to come. Another type of information-related infrastructure that we're about to roll out is a new framework that's geared to walking. And we've done a lot to improve the design of our streets, and we've done very little in terms of pedestrian information. You know, there are great signs for cars, not great signs for people who are walking. And this new wayfinding system will make it clear whether a trip is best made on foot or by cab or by subway. And we've done a lot of opinion testing about which features work best, and we're going to be deploying the first elements of this system this spring. So in addition to pointing the way forward on mobility, I think the business case for updating our streets is increasingly clear. You can see the quality of life benefits associated with bringing a plaza, new public realm, new seating to a community, but it's also good for business, and it's good for their bottom line. In Brooklyn's Dumbo district, we found that retail sales in stores increased 172% in the 3 years after the plaza was implemented. And we've seen similar results after the work that we did on Vanderbilt Avenue in Brooklyn, and retail sales doubled 3 years after implementation. So, and we've got findings on 9th Avenue where we've seen retail sales go up some 50% since that project was started. All of these street design changes and strategies have been codified in the city's new street design manual, which is really a new operating code for the streets of New York, and that meets the needs of New York City today, not the needs of New York City in the year 1950. And what we're now doing is working with other cities on developing a national edition of this manual to really unshackle city streets from the highway building specifications of the 20th century that have prevented better approaches on our streets for far too long. And we're going to be drilling down on these issues at a conference next week at NYU at the Kimmel Center called Designing Cities. We'll have the Secretary of Transportation there. We'll be talking about our new book on designing cities. Mayor Bloomberg will be there. The transportation commissioners from the largest cities will be there. It'll be a great event, and I hope all of you can come. I want to conclude with just a couple of observations. First, there is no question that technology is going to continue to play a bigger and bigger role in the management and the operation of our infrastructure, roads and bridges, and how people get and make decisions based on real-time information. We started in Midtown with real-time traffic adjustment of traffic signals to match real-time conditions. That's going to expand. The second piece is the critical importance that safety plays in designing transportation projects and strategies. You know, safety and sustainability are not always talked about in the same sentence, but they should be, because you are not going to get people onto bikes, you're not going to get more people walking if they don't feel safe doing so. So we've worked very, very hard through our initiatives to drive traffic fatalities down. They're their lowest in 100 years. We've had a recent uptick, but the trend is continuing. Our streets have never been safer. Finally, we have to continue to take care of the basics as we innovate. Under Mayor Bloomberg's leadership, we've invested $5 billion over the last 5 years and our roads and bridges are in the best condition that they've been in for generations. It is the foundation of the economic growth of the city. I think that the future of urban mobility is being written today, and from the curb line to the skyline, and the work is going on in all the areas that I described in all boroughs across the city. I do think it's fair to say that urban innovation is out of its cage, and there's no going back now. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panel, Mart Flegenheimer from the New York Times, Sue Zielinski, Bruce Schaller, and Mark Gorton.
I have a quick story. The commissioner knows this one all too well, unfortunately. So I've been covering transportation for the Times for about 4 months, which I've absolutely loved. When I started on the beat, this was around June. This was sort of the height of bike share fever. I became very aware of a sort of embarrassing shortcoming of my past, which is that I never learned how to ride a bike. I grew up in New York City, and while I had friends who rode, it was never much of an issue for me. My parents didn't force it. I rode the subway. I got around. It was really not much of an issue. And very soon after I started on the beat, it became bleedingly obvious to me that the game had changed, and that to cover the city's transportation network adequately and to understand the city well, I was going to need to get on a bike. So I've been learning, and I hope to be ready for bike share now, which has been delayed until the spring. But I think among many other things that have changed in the city's transportation network, this is something that's been so critical to the fabric of the city that I didn't really have a choice. And I bring this up not to draw attention to a semi-embarrassing personal anecdote, though I've done that in print before at the insistence of some editors. But to say, 20 years from now, when another native New Yorker surveys the transportation landscape of the city, what will make him or her stop and think and say, whoa, where did this come from? So I hope that's sort of the backdrop of what we can talk about today. And I want to jump in with Susan right away and ask, this was something that we posed earlier, the automobile here. How does this fit into the plans for the future of a city? Can it be made to comport with a world in which increasingly the car is portrayed as sort of an enemy to urban innovation?
Well, I love that question, because when I think, is it all or nothing, I saw that in the brochure, is this all or nothing? And that struck me as being so last millennium, because here we are, this is the systems generation. Janette was talking about this is the future. It's all about integrated technology, and it's more sophisticated, and it's more customized, and it's sexier. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And I have to say, I don't know if my slides are up. Is it possible to get the first slide? Do I just click it?
They're up.
Oh, they're up.
There you go.
Yeah, when I moved from Toronto, being a transportation planner, to Detroit, I realized that it is the belly of the beast, and the future doesn't come to all places at the same time. And so there's this kind of sense of the car is transportation. And I see it as a sort of an automotive narcissism that there's a view of everything through the car. But what we know is that globally, it's actually multimodal. And what we've got, if Friedman might say transportation is flat. So what we have is multimodal, sustainable, door-to-door, IT-enhanced transportation that offers more choices and more connected choices. And what you've got then is you can move seamlessly. Actually, the first thing is that it focuses on the user, the fact that actually the person who needs to get from A to B is the most important. So you can go seamlessly from your bus to your car share to your bike, stopping at mobility points and being able to make the transfer. And the really neat part there is that there's an emerging industry cluster around this. We've heard about Mark Gorton's IT efforts and all the new services, and also Ford Motor Company, for example, is rethinking of itself as a transportation company rather than a car company. We've got IBM and Cisco, huge, large industry cluster transformation and smaller industry transformation. And why does this happen? Well, we've got this great, with urbanization, we've got this huge flurry of innovation. And it's all in different spots. So you've got these services like the zip cars, and you've got new technologies like integrated wayfinding, and you've got new design approaches, and you've got working on cars. But none of these things come together. So what we have to do is we have to connect the dots. And with that, that brings the economic cluster together. Now, so what we focus on at SMART is three things that we see are missing. There's great innovation, but it's not coming together, so we connect the dots. We try and catalyze the economic opportunity for saving money, creating jobs, revitalizing local economies, and shifting the cluster, not letting the private sector off the hook, and also involving the private sector. And we also look at how we change the story from, oh, you have to get out of your car and you're going to have to get on a stinky bus just because that's the environmental thing to do. But no, it's the sexiest, most amazing thing to have more options that are more connected. As Rumi said, change your language and you change the world. So with that, how do you do it is the big trick. What we have at SMART is this wonderful set of partnerships around the world in India, South Africa, Brazil, and the Philippines, and the US. We have living labs where we actually work on applying this. It's really tricky with a systems approach because you can't choose one thing and then do it serially. It all has to happen at once in sort of a hologram. So we've worked with folks listening to the needs in a customized way and developed a bit of an approach that's actually, I realize that the clicking isn't working. We've developed an approach to develop the new mobility grid. And one of the reasons is that I don't know is there anyone in the room that's had a frustrating transportation meeting experience? My experience is that in a 2-hour meeting, an hour and 3/4 is talking about what doesn't work. And then somebody looks at their watch and says, uh-oh, we were supposed to come up with solutions. And then there's a laundry list. And then with the laundry list, someone says, I'm the voice of reason. Let's prioritize. When you're trying to put a system in place, it's not about prioritizing. It's about actually developing the system. So what we've actually done, I'll just finish off with the approach that we've come to. It's a 4-step approach, and we didn't come up with the 12-step because of attention deficit problems. But it kind of evolved by, first of all, bringing all the players to the table. So big business, small businesses, technologies, the usual suspects from government, like planners and engineers, but also social services, tourism, economic development, and a whole range of government agencies at all levels. And we do this per region. We do it in a customized way. And then we ask, first of all, what is working, rather than what isn't working, which freaks people out, actually. And then once they get into it, they go, okay, and these are the leaders of all these different things. And then we map out what is there, and we say, what are the connection points between those things that are there? So we did this in Washington, D.C., and there was a region-wide network, which we call the new mobility grid, of connection points between these things that allow people to go from one mode to the other. And in fact, in Washington, D.C., we were going to put the red dot where 2 or more things connected, and there were so many red dots, we had to up the ante to 4. So we had this incredible grid that already existed, and we could just give out the map and actually put up signs where those connection points are. But even from there, you begin to see what's missing. You begin to see how to enhance that integrated system that's user-focused. So from there, the whole reason for doing that is to identify pilots that people can work on together in the absence sometimes of public policy. So when we do this in India, we have to think about, well, you won't necessarily change policy and you won't necessarily change land use right away, but you can do instant things like moving a zip car across the road to link with the bus stop, or bringing in an app, or starting a bus company that connects the dots. So this is an approach to developing systems in regions based on what is already there and enhancing this in an optimizing way. So in terms of, is this the end of the car? No, it includes connected electric vehicle plug-in stations at the same place as the bus stops and the train stations, and a whole linked grid of options.
Well, I want to let Bruce jump in here quickly, because that's what the situation requires, unfortunately, and ask about sort of beyond policy prescriptions, how you win the hearts and minds. Obviously, there's been a great controversy over many of the initiatives. I think people have come to embrace them gradually in some cases, more quickly in others. But how do you convince residents, whether it's in this city or others, that what you're doing is not a threat to their notions of transportation, which in many cases have been entrenched for years and years and years?
Right. So that's an excellent question because it's something that we've spent a lot of time working on. In the time I've been at the agency, it's been something that I've had high on my agenda to really answer that question. When the traditional role of the city agency, city staff, when you go out and start a project and start to talk to the community or have a project all planned out and go out and talk to the community about it, is you say, hey, I got this great idea. I have this great thing for you. And they say, who are you? You're from the city. So you're not going to listen to me. You're just going to do whatever you want here, right? It's not worth my talking to you, right? And so a part of what we've needed to do is we've needed to find ways, and part of this is not to blame the community. This is in many cases, this was really not a good approach that the city agencies took, whether it was DOT or other agencies. And so a big challenge to redesigning streets has been to find a way to have a good, constructive conversation with people. And we've, I think, done a pretty good job of getting over that initial sort of New York greeting of go away, you're going to do this anyway. Right. And for us to learn how to approach these, the key to which is really to start the outreach and the planning at the same time. To do outreach, to do planning, to do outreach, to do planning. So you're having a conversation in defining what the problem is, in looking at possible solutions, in working this through. Last night, CB6 in Jackson Heights, which includes Jackson Heights and Queens, adopted by a vote of something like 30-1.
I saw this, yeah.
The Park Smart, to do a Park Smart pilot, which is a peak rate parking pilot project. It's got too many P's in it. You know what happened with congestion pricing, right? Well, imagine if you think people get upset about trying to charge for them driving their car, imagine how they feel about charging more to park their car. It's even worse. And so to have that kind of support, and in just this morning, I talked to my staff who were there last night. I said, what made the difference? And the difference was the relationship they had over the past 2 years in doing a project that transformed the streets in Jackson Heights. And it's that relationship and having the conversation and the trust back and forth. And so it's that, we say collaborative planning process. We say all this great stuff, but that's really what it is. And I just wanted to, if I have another minute, is there's five questions, which I'll just run through quickly, that we ask ourselves as planners as we look at a street or an intersection or corridor or a neighborhood, which lead into answers which can be good for bikes and buses and people walking around, good for public space, and remarkably enough, it's actually possible to be good for all those things and be good for drivers and traffic too. So I'll just run through these quickly because this is sort of the design part, and I know people are very interested in design here in many different fields. So this is the street design part of it. So the first question we ask is, are we asking the street or the intersection to do more than it can really do? We have many parts of the city, you think of Times Square or Herald Square, but many parts of the city, in Jackson Heights was a good example, where we have a number of streets that come together at various odd angles. And we've tried to say, well, everyone's important here, so everyone should be able to go straight or turn left or turn right or cross at any intersection, and it just doesn't work for anybody. We're dividing the space and the time up in too many little slices here. So we say, well, what are the really important movements here? We prioritize them. We make the traffic work going through. We shorten the crossing distances that you cross walking. We try and make right angles instead of odd angles to the streets. And so it works better for traffic. It's easier to walk around. It's easier to ride your bike through. Certainly helps for transit. And it's much, much safer too. So that's one question. Secondly, can we organize the street for safe and easy to use movements along a corridor? So I'll give an example. A common example here is what we call, kind of in techno speak, a 4 to 3. So you'll have a street 55 feet wide, has 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, has a parking lane. They're all kind of squeezed together. We take those 4 lanes, make them 3 lanes, a center turn lane, 2 good lanes for through traffic, and then a wide parking lane. So that means that it's much easier to make a left turn or a right turn. It's much easier just to drive through the corridor. You're not switching back and forth between lanes. It's much easier to cross the street, easier and safer, and to bike along the parked cars as well. So that's another thing that is good for everybody. Third, and I'll just do this quickly, can we convert street space that's not needed for traffic flow or parking to public space or bike or ped use? Can we improve the efficiency of parking and deliveries along the curb to provide access and to keep stationary vehicles from blocking cars and bikes? And finally, can we advance the citywide networks for bikes and buses and trucks as we work in a given area? So the end result of asking these questions is you get the kind of increases in bus ridership and biking and people walking and using the public spaces. You get 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% reductions in crashes with injuries. And you set up, by asking these questions, you set up a process that you could have these are very intuitive questions, very common sense. There's a problem, there's a solution. Double parking, clear problem. Here's how we can address that. And so you have a good conversation with the community about the problems you're trying to solve. You can show, yeah, these are effective projects. We should be doing more of this. We get more and more requests for them. And in this process of looking at these questions and having this conversation with the community, we get such excellent feedback that we do much better projects than we would do if we just did it ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we seed the ground for doing more and having more of the sort of transformative projects that my commissioner showed you in her presentation.
I'm going to jump in quickly on that so we give Mark a chance here. As you hear what Bruce is speaking about, do you feel satisfied with the pace and the scope of the changes in New York or elsewhere recently, and how do you think going forward this can be improved?
Well, I don't think I personally am ever satisfied with that sort of thing, but I will say that we have an absolutely amazing commissioner of our Department of Transportation who's built an amazing team. I mean, I know a lot of those people, and they have done about as much as is humanly possible to turn around a giant government bureaucracy from really one that was focused single-mindedly on moving cars to one that is rolling out a host of innovations in so many different dimensions. I mean, I would like things to go faster. I certainly want things to go faster in my own neighborhood. I mean, we have really terrible livability problems in our city that comes with, with these, from the decades of auto-centric planning that we've had. And, there's a situation now where my son, who's 8 years old, can't cross the street to visit his best friend who lives right across the street. You need a parent to mediate that sort of thing. And there are afternoons when my son is stuck inside and his friend is stuck inside across the street, and they can't meet because we've designed our world for cars. And I don't think you can ever solve problems like that fast enough. And there really is so much more that can be done. And it's really unfortunate that the DOT has had to spend so much energy fighting against people who just don't understand what they're doing. And I mean, change is hard for everybody, and we've made a lot of great progress in the last 5 years, and there's a lot of new things to learn. And there's a lot about transportation that's a bit counterintuitive. Things like induced demand and all sorts of, integrating land use planning and transportation. These are not topics that the average person understands, but I'm sure that the whole staff at DOT knows that they meet countless traffic experts everywhere they go who don't understand how much there is to learn about these topics. But now I think in the last 5 years, they've rolled out so many innovations, and what's amazing is the incredibly high percentage of them that works. The bus innovations have worked, the bike innovations have worked, the pedestrian plaza innovations have worked, the technology innovations, just one after another, they pretty much all work. They've worked for moving people, they've worked for businesses, they've worked for livability, and hopefully we're at a point now where people get that this works, and a lot of these things are pretty easy to do. You just have to close the street and let human life happen in a lot of places. And none of these things are easy, but there's so much chance to do so much more quickly, and I really hope that across the city there's a consensus forming that this stuff is good, and the only question is how fast can we implement it, and not should we be doing this, because practically everything they've done has been successful, and there's so much more that can be done.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's actually our time. I hear the music playing, so we should probably get off the stage. But thank you very much.